Hey there guys, welcome to the channel. So I've got a twofer today. I love videos of Vivek Ramaswamy crushing the soul of seemingly unintelligent journalists. And even more, I love watching Chuck Todd look like a dummy. So today we got both. And they cover basically all the good stuff, you know, gender issues, cancel culture, and even the dramatic idea of, you know, the dissolution of the FBI. So let's kick things off with Chuck Todd swinging in some curveballs, or what he thinks are curveballs, and let's see if Vivek is prepared to handle them. But before we do, guys, thanks so much. Thank you very much to anyone who's been subscribing and commenting. We really appreciate the support, guys. And if you haven't already, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share Common Sense Garage. Every time you do, a leftist loses their wings. Check this out.
Rhetoric can sound uniting, and your answer just now, but then you say the following things. The trans movement has become a cult. We need to abandon climate religion in America. I definitely find the idea of systemic racism revolting. I say this, how do you square those statements with unification? These are divisive times. This is a polarizing time. We're pretty evenly divided on these cultural issues. How do you unite the country when you're essentially denigrating the views of half of the country?
So Todd is throwing out some pretty big claims here, purposefully sticking to topics that are deeply divisive. Like, they don't get any more divisive than this. And he's discussing the trans movement, climate change, systemic racism in really, really broad strokes too. And the implication is that these issues, which definitely require really, really careful discussion, they're just being simplified. They're being commercialized, or they're being used for personal gain, which hilariously is exactly what Chuck Todd is doing when talking about him in this case. So his perspective, Chuck Todd, that he shows us is, you know, it might resonate with some people. I'm sure a lot of people that actually watch him, well, the few that do, but others, they're going to say he's oversimplified, you know, and whether or not half the country disagrees with these perspectives like he claims, which cannot be true, that's a topic for debate. But let's not get lost in the weeds on this just yet. Let's see what Vivek has to say.
I don't think I'm denigrating the views of half the country. I mean, let's take the touchiest of those subjects right now on the trans issue. I think that when a kid says that I'm born into the wrong body, that my gender doesn't match my biological sex, more often than not, that is a case of a mental health disorder. That doesn't mean you disrespect that person. It means they're crying out for help. I met with two young women who regret the decisions they made, going through double mastectomies, one a hysterectomy, chemical intervention, now trying to teach kids across the country that when you're struggling inside, going through adolescence, yes, that involves some struggle. We live in a cultural moment today where adults are affirming that confusion rather than actually treating them compassionately. That's cruelty.
You ever talk to parents that have a kid who's going through this?
I have, actually. Yeah, and I think
it's a parent. My point is,
it's a difficult place to be. I acknowledge
right.
that. But what we need to do on both sides here is act with compassion, not really what makes us feel good about ourselves. Yeah. And I think that's my main issue across our response to transgenderism and to climate. It's solving the actual underlying issues rather than what allows you to signal your virtue.
What makes it compassionate, though, to pass a law that denies a parent making their own health care decision for their kid? That's the part of this. That doesn't sound very conservative and small government to me.
Well, look, there isn't a state in this union that allows you to smoke an addictive cigarette before the age of 18, that allows you to get a tattoo before the age of 18. That's a body-altering change that a kid may later regret in life. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to say that if you're after 18 years old, you're free to decide whatever you want to do. That's what it means to live in a free country. But below the age of 18, I think it's perfectly legitimate to say that we won't allow genital mutilation or chemical castration through puberty blockers for the purpose of gender transition.
But how do you know it's that? Again, how do you know, are you confident that you know that gender is as binary as you're describing it? Are you confident that it isn't a spectrum?
I am.
You know this as a scientist?
Well, there's two X chromosomes if you're a woman, an X and a Y. That means you're a man.
There's a lot of scientific research out there. There's a lot of scientific research out there that says gender is a spectrum.
Chuck, I respectfully disagree. Gender dysphoria for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-5, has been characterized as a mental health disorder, and I don't think it's compassionate to affirm that. I think that's cruelty. When a kid is crying out for help, what they're asking for is, you got to ask the question of what else is going wrong at home? What else is going wrong at school? Let's be compassionate and get to the heart of that, rather than playing this game as though we're actually changing our medical understanding for the last 100 years.
I go back to this. If a parent is dealing with a child that has these, that may have these issues, trust me, the last thing they want to do is consider something like this. But if that is what they think could help their child pursue happiness, or they're not to kill themselves, why take away that option? Again, why shouldn't it be up to the parent?
So part of why parents now suddenly feel that way, let's ask ourselves that, Chuck, is we've created a culture that teaches parents that they're being bigoted or that they're bad people if they don't actually take those steps. So part of what I think is, listen, gender dysphoria, for the rare few people who have suffered it, is a condition of suffering. My question is, why on earth are we going out of our way to create even more of it? And there's no doubt that the cultural movement in this country, even education, is creating more gender dysphoria. If it's a condition of suffering, let's not create more of it. That's what we're doing.
So isn't it kind of wild, man, when you see these well-known faces, these establishment personalities, you know, we'll call them that for the sake of conversation, like our buddy Chuck Todd, you know, appearing on mainstream channels. You know, is he a journalist? Is he a propagandist? It's really, really tough to tell. And then out of the blue, you'll hear comments about the nature of gender or parents' choices in their child's health care. I mean, come on. You used to be a serious person. You know, when did defending things like children having surgeries become a part of that conversation? When did that become a partisan thing? And even though I feel like I know exactly what's going on in today's society, it still surprises me sometimes to see established people defending certain really, really controversial stances. You know, it's like, at what point do we pause and think, okay, maybe I'm not right. Maybe this is not quite right, you know?
Let me ask you about the idea of cancel culture, because I feel like the criticism that the right was making of the left 2 years ago, that it looks like some on the right are embracing cancel culture. I think Bud Light. I think about the transgender representative in Montana who was basically not allowed to speak on the floor. Do you think some of this is going too far?
So look, I'm an opponent of victimhood culture, cancel culture, you name it. I've written a book about this. I do think that the way the culture war ends is not with a bang, but with a whimper, where both sides get infected by those same norms.
You think the right's been infected by this?
One of the things I say to conservative audiences across the country is we have to be the party of free speech and open debate. We can't be the party that says, I won't talk to, I'm here talking to you on NBC. There's other candidates in this race that say they won't talk to NBC News. Ron DeSantis is one of them. I go to college campuses where other candidates refuse to go. So I think we got to practice what we preach. I'm in this race as a millennial, as a young person who's lived the American dream, to actually walk the walk when it comes to free speech and open debate. And yes, I would like to see other Republicans rise to that occasion and do better, starting with the debate stage in our own party this fall.
If Donald Trump doesn't do debates, will you not support him if he's the nominee?
Well, I'm not going to let him get away with that. Donald Trump...
What does that mean? What do you mean you're not going to let him get away with it? He
look,
can do what he wants to do.
I don't think the other candidates, including Donald Trump, are going to relish being on that debate stage with me. But I think that the way that he's shown in 2015, what people gave him credit for was that he was an outsider and a disruptor. I'm the outsider in this race. And I think that if you want to be part of, like Joe Biden, an existing establishment that doesn't want to debate, I think people are hungry for new blood.
What should the party use as leverage to force him to show up on the debate stage?
I think it's the voters. I think it's my job and it's the job of candidates to tell voters that if you want someone sitting across the table from Xi Jinping, if you want someone with the spine to take on the administrative state, it's the top of my domestic agenda, you better darn well not be scared to show up on a debate stage with the new challenger. Donald Trump did a great job of that in 2015. I'm the outsider in this race.
So if there's one thing that the world could definitely use more of, it's open dialogue. You know, it's through these honest discussions that bad ideas get exposed and brilliant ones win. And the beauty of it is, you know, that these ideas get to prove their worth in real time, out in the open, in daylight. You know, the left likes to believe that the only way to beat a bad idea is to silence it. But this has never been true, and this has never, ever worked. You know, that is only how you protect a bad idea. The only way to truly destroy a bad idea is with better ideas.
That is a bit of a head scratcher for me, is defund the FBI.
Yeah.
So if you
I didn't say defund the FBI. I said shut down the FBI and replace it with something new. Yeah.
So you want to shut down the FBI? What are you replacing it with?
I think it's a new apparatus built from scratch that actually respects the law instead of making it up. And the funny thing, Chuck, is if you look at over the last...
Do you think the FBI constantly is making up the law? That is a huge charge. They just stopped major fentanyl. Been able to get rid of. I mean, there's a lot of work the FBI does, other than respond to complaints from elected officials who don't like investigations.
Well, actually, if you look over the course of the last 60 years, J. Edgar Hoover, what he did to Martin Luther King, that was an affront. It's still the J. Edgar Hoover FBI that people walk into down the street here in Washington, D.C. And I personally believe, as somebody who's running to actually run the executive branch of the government, when you have a bureaucracy whose culture becomes so ossified, every once in a while you need to turn it over. And I think that, yes, we need federal law enforcement, but that institution has, in a bipartisan way, become so, I think, ossified in its own norms, in its own corruption, that we need to rebuild it from scratch and have something.
So you're going to replace the FBI with a new FBI?
Well, with a new institution built from scratch to carry out federal law enforcement, because the existing FBI, the people who work there, have worked there for so long that actually they're going to be getting in their own way. I think that that's actually important. And by the way, I also support
it does sound like you're just replacing the FBI with the FBI.
Well, the problem is there's people who have worked there for decades. And so what I say is, if I'm the U.S. president and I can't work for the federal government for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then none of those bureaucrats reporting into me should either. That's the point I'm making.
So I like this topic. It's interesting. The whole idea of draining the swamp and dissolving, established agencies like the FBI, it's huge. It's a huge deal. And it may not be as crazy as it sounds, but I honestly don't see exactly how it's possible. These aren't just government agencies. They're very, very intricate systems with a lot of good people that have dedicated their entire lives to their roles. And the amount of pushback and bureaucracy and behind the scenes jarring and jostling and wheeling and dealing, it's impossible to even imagine. And I can't see how it happens. But what I do think is possible is the idea of decentralizing it, getting the headquarters out of and away from Washington and spreading things out. I don't know, all that is obviously way above my pay grade. But I do know that even if it isn't actually weaponized, enough people believe that it is, for things to need to be addressed. The Hunter Biden plea deal fiasco is proof enough. Something needs to happen. And anyway, that's just my take, guys. Let me know yours in the comments. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Most important, to share the Common Sense Garage. We'll see you in the next one.